It was the day of reckoning, the day the old Rangers died and the new Rangers was born, fighting to stay alive.
It's like being at a funeral with no coffin there.
Quite emotional. Disappointed.
I'm sick. I haven't slept for 3 months.
They can come on the board and they can be party to what we're doing.
He's a legend. He's a legend for this club.
What we're not going to do is sit around and wait, because if we hadn't come along, this club would have closed.
On a day when history was rewritten at Ibrox, this is a Scotland Tonight special. In football terms, this would be a classic. It's got all the ingredients: dramatic high stakes, passion, players who are loved and loathed, a match that ebbs and flows and now seems to be going into extra time. Rangers is fighting for its very existence. After more than 100 years, it has a new name, the Rangers Football Club, and it has a new chief executive, Charles Green. Its most successful manager, Walter Smith, has also dramatically emerged to front a bid to buy the club from Green. But either way, it will be a new Rangers, a new co. For many fans, it will never be the same. Tonight, we will look at what went wrong, the roles of Sir David Murray, Craig White and the administrators. And we'll try to answer what next for Rangers on and off the pitch, for Scottish football and the economy of other clubs, with our guests including Archie Macpherson, tax expert Tracy Campbell-Hind, journalist Tom English and former Rangers player Colin Jackson. Later, we'll also be speaking to Gordon Smith, who worked under Craig White. First, though, to a day of drama. David Cowan takes up the story.
For years, they shared the glory at Ibrox. Now, with Rangers in the depths of their darkest hour, the fans are wondering if Walter Smith and Alan McCoist are going to be reunited. The day started with headlines claiming McCoist was going to quit.
Alan McCoist's going to be the Rangers manager moving forward.
As far as I'm concerned, yeah, we want Alan McCoist and all the players to remain with the club.
At 10 o'clock, creditors arrived for a foregone conclusion, a pointless vote on the company voluntary arrangement that had already been kicked into touch by the taxman. Its failure paved the way for Green's consortium to buy the club and its assets and move them into a new company called the Rangers Football Club. The creditors were told the old company would be liquidated after the administration process comes to an end in 6 to 10 weeks' time. As a creditor, STV was inside.
Well, that's it. The meeting took just 9 minutes. It started with one of the administrators saying it was rather academic, and that's the way it turned out to be. 113 years of history is over. Rangers PLC is finished, and the club is now heading towards liquidation and a new company.
Very sad. As my friend said, it's like being at a funeral with no coffin there.
Words fail me. It's shattering.
At 1 o'clock, fans who'd put their money into the club, buying shares that are now worthless, arrived for their meeting with the administrators. It too was over in minutes.
Really disappointed. Quite emotional. Disappointed.
Sick. I haven't slept for 3 months. And I just...
Ali McCoist's silent departure from the ground will have done nothing to quell the fears of Rangers fans. But within hours, his old boss announced he was leading a new bid, helped by businessmen including Jim McCall, a genuine, bona fide multi-millionaire. Walter Smith called for Charles Green to step aside so his consortium could take the Newco route. Yet again, this saga had thrown in a bolt from the blue.
Walter Smith is a very compelling buyer from a fan's point of view, and there's some very credible backers behind him, so I think the fans will get behind this bid in a large numbers. I say the problem is he can't actually buy it unless Charles Green steps aside, or Charles Green is prepared to sell it to him at some future point in time. I mean, it could be that Charles Green could actually make some money out of this. He could buy it for $5.5 million and sell it for an enhanced sum in a number of days or weeks.
We get the shine off Imran's head.
A cheerful Charles Green announced his consortium's purchase of Rangers was a done deal. He said he expected Ali McCoist to support Walter Smith, but still wants McCoist as manager. He suggested Smith and his allies could come on board as investors.
If Walter, Jim McCall, Douglas Park, Uncle Tom Cobley want to be an investor in this club, this man will take cheques off them. He'll put it in Rangers' bank account, not his bank account, not Charles Green's bank account. They can come on the board and they can be party to what we're doing. But what we're not going to do is sit around and wait, because if we hadn't come along, this club would have closed.
So what happens now? Well, the lesson from the crisis at Ibrox is to expect the unexpected.
Many fans may have been buoyed by Walter Smith's intervention or by Charles Green's words, but their club's perilous state remains the same. After 140 years, the Rangers story has changed forever. Today, after 140 years of glory that made it domestically the most successful club in the world, Rangers as a business entity at least died. As a football club, though, it lives on, its supporters fighting for it to the last. The history of a big club is marked by big personalities. The first colossus of Ibrox was Bill Struth. He led Rangers for 34 years, amassing a breathtaking 18 league championships and 10 Scottish Cups. Struth defined Rangers as a cause. The highest standards were expected. Clean-shaven players wearing bowler hats personified his disciplinarian regime. Rangers' stranglehold on Scottish football continued beyond the Struth era. Scott Simon's 13-year tenure brought 6 championships, 5 Scottish Cups and 2 European Cup Winners' Cup finals in 1961 and 67. That dominance ended with the arrival of Jock Stein at Celtic in 1965. For 9 long years, Rangers endured their fiercest rivals, sweeping all before them.
And how their supporters thanked their stars they'd come to Lisbon.
On the 2nd of January 1971, 66 people left home to cheer their team. They were never to return.
The news that would cause our whole nation to mourn.
The very term Ibrox disaster is synonymous with the pain that still haunts to this day. It helped enshrine a special place for the dead in the folklore of the club, and its legacy paved the way for the building of a world-class football ground.
Stein, magnificent goal. Magnificent goal.
From the tears of Stairway 13 to those of unrestrained joy in Catalonia, 1972 was the high point. A fine side which had been eclipsed by their more prestigious Glasgow neighbours finally registered throughout the continent, and the Cup Winners' Cup was brought home. The mid-70s coincided with a decline in Celtic's preeminence. The Stein era was drawing to an end, and a period of Old Firm equilibrium was to ensue. Jock Wallace, manager from 1972 to 78, embodied the essence of the Rangers bear.
Come on!
Okay. Tough, uncompromising, incapable of surrender. It brought further success on the field.
They've won it once, that was enough.
And then the new firm put the old firm in their place, but their emergence disproportionately battered the blue half of Glasgow. By 1983, the club were in crisis. Gates were down, and a club legend, the most revered in their playing history, was sacked after a disastrous 5-year period as manager.
There he is, a rapturous welcome for Jock Wallace. The Rangers support, who really have suffered for some time, now regard him as their salvation.
The return of Jock Wallace in 1983 failed to restore Rangers' fortunes. The club was desperate for a visionary. He arrived in 1988. His name was David Murray.
What are your plans for Rangers Football Club?
To carry on the fine work that's already been started by the Lawrence Group, build on that and hopefully retain the club in the future to be #1 football club in Scotland.
Revolution ensued. Graham Souness's appointment as manager 2 years earlier was imaginative but risky.
But the red card has been shown to Graham Souness.
With Murray and Souness at the helm, anything seemed possible. Big-name players arrived. Money was no object. Cynics observed that trophies were bought.
I think everybody knows who it is. I am absolutely delighted to have Morris joining Rangers Football Club.
In 1989, a seismic shift. Murray and Souness dispensed with the policy of not signing Catholics. The move redefined the club, annoyed a hardcore, bigoted fringe, and shattered more than a century of tradition which had become an embarrassment.
Do you think Rangers should have signed a Catholic?
No. No, I don't think they shouldn't. They should keep to the reign.
Just unbelievable. Can't get over it. I'll maybe wake up in the morning and it'll not be true. Everything's away now, innit?
What do you mean by that?
Religion and everything.
Souness sprinkled the trophy dust. The roll of honour got longer and more impressive. These were heady days, and they got headier under Souness's successor. In the 1992-93 Champions League campaign, Rangers came within one game of the final. No Scottish team has come so close since. Souness had departed, but the man, known simply as Walter, cemented success and emulated Celtic's feat of winning 9 successive championships.
I've always said Rangers would rather have an overdraft and win something than have no overdraft and not win something.
But the seeds of financial destruction more than a decade later were sown as Murray sought to conquer Europe. Dick Advocaat's appointment in 1998 screamed ambition, but it ushered in cavalier, reckless and ultimately suicidal spending. A seemingly bottomless pit of money brought £30 million worth of signings in 2000. Only £4 million was brought in on players leaving Ibrox. It was the economics of the asylum. The £12 million signing of Torre Andre Flo, a monument to mad spending and a portent of ensuing financial crisis that would push the club over the edge. The Advocaat years brought domestic success, challenged only when Martin O'Neill arrived in the East End. But the European dream proved elusive, and the much-heralded Dutch master failed to paint the continent red, white and blue. By the time Alec McLeish arrived in late 2001, the writing was already on the wall. Rangers were the footballing equivalent of the Greek economy, even if the problems were masked by an imposing chairman and a media who rarely challenged his writ.
Your time for a minute?
For all that Rangers kept the show on the road, Celtic momentarily threatened prolonged dominance. Walter Smith's return steadied the ship and even allowed the faithful the high of another European final. Rangers lost on and off the pitch in Manchester, ironically to Dick Advocaat's Zenit St Petersburg. But not even success could camouflage the ensuing financial calamity.
Let's talk about your future then.
Yes.
When will David Murray call it a day here?
I think it's been well publicised that I said that if somebody thinks they can come and do a better job, I was happy to hand the baton over. I expect to get a reasonable figure for the club and I'd be happy to hand over as long as I believed that person was fit for purpose and could do a good job for the football club.
Sir David Murray, drained by the carping of many supporters and tired of trying to get to the illusory next level, sold out to Craig White, a businessman who seemed to operate in the financial shadows. When a light was shone on his activities and questions asked, the result was a series of unconvincing, slippery answers.
I've got nothing to hide at all. There's always situations that don't work out, and that's part of risk taking. I get nothing to be ashamed of. You look back at your career, there'll always be some things that you regret. I think ultimately my track record speaks for itself.
Season 2011-12 reads like a verse of infamy. Malmo, Maribor, Falkirk, a 15-point lead squandered. Off the park, the club imploded.
This is a difficult day for Rangers, but we'll emerge in a fitter and stronger club from this. Thank you very much.
The resulting vortex had the fans in a spin and the money men at one another's throat. There were many pretenders promising salvation, but in the end, the financial sins could not be atoned.
What we're not going to do is sit around and wait, because if we hadn't come along, this club would have closed.
Charles Green is the new owner of the new Rangers, as Walter Smith returns to the fray. For 140 years, Rangers entertained and allowed a vast diaspora of followers to dream. They're more than just a club, and always will be. Some of their traditions have alienated those who do not follow them. Not all the tears being shed are done in sorrow. This is a chapter in which a once great club has been brought to its knees. Other indignities lie ahead. But tonight, those who might consider themselves Rangers men are refusing to lie down. The passion for the red, white and blue will transcend and endure what is, after all, a corporate kill-off. Rangers will be reborn to fight another day. For the moment, though, purgatory is their state. Well, to discuss the downfall of Rangers, I'm joined by Tom English, the chief sports writer for Scotland on Sunday, the doyen of Scottish football, Archie Macpherson, former Rangers player Colin Jackson, and the debt recovery lawyer from TCH Law, Tracy Campbell-Hine. Welcome all to Scotland tonight. Colin, former Rangers player, how are you feeling tonight?
A bit shattered, to be fair. There's so many things happening within the space of the last 24 hours, it's hard to get up with it. Every hour things seem to take another turn, another twist. From Charles Green, we now have, Walter Smith, great. I'm all for that. But the timing seems to be always at the back end of something, and decision, I thought that was it, finished. Charles Green, that's fine, new owner, end of story. No, it's not. We're going through this again, so it's a bit of a hard take. And you've seen the supporters, they're breaking down, some of them, and I can imagine why. This has dragged on too long. We need an answer soon now.
And Tracy, is there any possibility, now that Charles Green has bought the company, and he says he has, that the Walter Smith-led consortium could actually buy it from him or take it over from him?
Well, there's every possibility. Charles Green owns it. He can, the company owns it. They can sell it to whomever they want. It doesn't need to be Walter Smith. It could be any consortium, any person that comes along with an offer. It's just what that offer will be and what will be acceptable to the new co.
Now, Charles Green made the point that he wouldn't sell his shares, but others may. That would be others in the consortium, presumably. Well,
certainly that's the shareholding, yes. Whomever those persons may be may well sell, but for what price?
One question we've had here from somebody who's tweeted, they've said the Rangers Football Club is too similar a name to Rangers Football Clubs. The name of the new company is almost the same as the old company, and that there should be a dramatic change.
That's a trading style, as I understand it. It's not the actual name of the company. There may have been an issue if the company name was similar within the 12 months after the winding up. However, they actually aren't wound up yet, but it's a trading style more than anything, as I understand it. And
Archie, you've seen a lot in Scottish football. How does this compare?
Well, to the Maurice Johnson signing, which was referred to there, that was sensational. This is almost historically overwhelming. This is a turning point in the Scottish game as a whole, not just for Rangers. I'll tell you what Rangers really need basically now. It seems a very simple step, and that is to get a spokesman who is coherent, who offers a little contrition, who makes it perfectly clear that he can distinguish between fact and fiction, though I suspect Edward JQC of the Leveson inquiry would find that difficult, because they need to explain and communicate, whoever is in charge now, they need to explain and articulate exactly what has happened and what they're now going to do with the new company. That's why so many Rangers supporters are bemused. They simply do not know, or haven't known even from the start, what has been happening. Now that seems a basic one, but communication is absolutely essential for clarity. And if they want the support, and now we're going to have a fight between the Walter Smith consortium and Green. So somebody has to explain this clearly to the supporters.
Well, Green certainly, Charles Green, a straight-talking Yorkshireman. Tom, what do you make of this takeover?
Well, look, it's gone through. We now have an 11th hour bid by Walter Smith's group. It was a kind of a pincer movement work today, I think. In the morning we had a story about Ali McCoist. He's going to be on his way out. That piled the pressure on Charles Green. Here was the ambassador of the club, the hero of the fans, supposedly being driven out by Charles Green. Green was bombarded by the fans at that point, and then bang, as soon as the club was liquidated, as soon as the dirty work was done, Walter Smith comes in with Jim McCall, and the fans are in ferment again, and they see this nirvana, this almost orgasmic possibility of Walter Smith taking over the club. Now, Charles Green is holding all the cards here, but once the fans articulate to Charles Green that they're not going to buy any season tickets off him, they'll buy them off Walter Smith, not going to buy any off him, Charles Green and his consortium could be stymied. And these people in his consortium, they're now going to come under focus for all the Rangers fans, and we'll see how they like it.
And Colin, as again with your Rangers background, is Charles Green, do you see him as a saviour, or would you prefer the Rangers takeover of Walter Smith?
If you rule by your heart, you've got to go with Walter. I mean, the track record alone, most successful manager. He's still around, he still looks quite fit. I don't think he would be the front man, nothing like that. But his name alone carries so much weight, and the supporters believe in him. And exactly what we're saying, we need decisions now, final decisions. And there are too many maybes. Charles Green, by all accounts, has done a good job. Maybe he's come in, he's got the club. Sorry?
Why so late?
Why so late, exactly.
Well, I think he's come in. I think Walter Smith and McCall have come in because they didn't want to be the ones that associated with the liquidation of Rangers Football Club.
Probably.
So as soon as the job was done, Archie, then they moved. And they moved almost within hours.
Somebody said to me, it was a Hib supporter said to me, Rangers have a huge support. They've got a lot of rich guys go to Ibrox. Why haven't, and this is a couple of months ago, why hasn't anybody stepped forward?
Well, the tax man...
and put their money where their heart is.
The HMRC didn't have something to do with that because no one knew what the figure was.
Well, that is obviously the difficulty, and we were speaking about it earlier, that it has taken quite a long time for the decision.
This is a question here from Douglas Laird. Want to know why HMRC have taken so long to decide, well, A, the process in picking Rangers up on the tax case, whether it's proved or otherwise, but also why it took them so long to reject a CVA. Why would that be?
Well, it didn't really take them that long to reject it. The CVA was only out a matter of weeks. So although
but if that was the policy, could they not have said it way back at the beginning, we won't accept a CVA?
To be fair to HMRC, it is on their website, that is their policy. So if you were reading it in black and white, that is what they were going to reject it. We just didn't know if there was any discussions in the background. We didn't know if there maybe had been talks that made the CVA more attractive to HMRC. Turned out that wasn't the case. I don't think that's the thrust. I think the thrust of it is more HMRC want to be able to go after individuals that potentially may have caused this.
And that's something we'll come to in a moment. Just one other question we had here, Robert Boyd. Why are Rangers assets not being sold to pay the creditors? Ibrox itself must be worth millions. Why isn't that happening?
Well, that is what's happened. The assets and the business as a whole, goodwill, etc., that is what has been sold for the 5.5 million.
To Charles Green?
Yes.
Had it been sold in the open market, would it have raised more, perhaps?
That is certainly a question that I've raised in the past as well. How did that valuation come around?
It's a listed building, remember?
Of course, right.
Yeah,
so
which
limited with what you can
restrict
do.
it, yeah.
There is that, but there's again planning. There's planning restrictions on Murray Park, etc.
Yeah,
the applications can be made for that to be changed.
Yeah. No, I'm sure.
I would be very interested to see the valuations.
Yeah.
And Tom, you think there's still maybe skullduggery going on here?
I don't know. I mean, I have not been convinced by Charles Green. He changes his story an awful lot. I'm thoroughly unconvinced by him. He's you know, even tonight, John. You know, he lists a number of his consortium, and one businessman, a Glasgow businessman called Ian Hart, is unveiled as being part of one of his backers, and then within an hour, Ian Hart issues a statement saying, "I'm not involved in Charles Green." Now, how can you trust someone who can't even get his ducks in a row on this momentous day?
Some of the blogs about him are really, unbelievably violent against him. I mean, talking about him being mendacious is to put it politely. And you have to say to yourself, is he right in saying, though, whatever you think of him, that he hadn't come along with that consortium, the club would have gone down?
I don't think so, Archie. If there was no Charles Green,
I'm not backing him.
There would have been, I know.
Question.
But there would have been the Blue Knights. Now the Blue Knights could have taken the Rangers into liquidation and done exactly. They were there. So
I think the preference though was for the CVA, because obviously that kept the company. So the difficulty is that there was the condition on the CVA that there was then this sale of 5.5 thereafter if the CVA wasn't approved.
Well, that's a saviour we're talking about. Let's have a look. Scotland Tonight commissioned its own survey of more than 1,000 fans, both Rangers and non-Rangers, to establish who they think was to blame. Interesting figures we see here. So David Murray is seen by most as the architect of the club's demise, followed by Craig White. Now it was split into football fans but not Rangers supporters, Rangers fans and not Rangers supporters. And actually the figures are pretty similar. We've got Rangers fans 86%, 66%, I beg your pardon, blaming David Murray. Now that's quite clearly, he comes out clearly top, 59% blaming Craig White, and that's reflected in the other categories. Are these the obvious bad guys?
Maybe they're not the only ones. Maybe there was somebody assisting, other people assisting them. But long ago, doubts were raised about David Murray and his intentions with Hugh Adam, of course, had become rather famous or infamous about his statement about contracts and so on, which are still to be examined. But on the other hand, he did tell me, I'm selling my shares, I'm getting out of this, because it's going down the drain. Yeah. Now, he was more egotistical than David Murray, and that is really saying something. So you don't lay great store by some of the stories he's coming up with, but there was no doubt about it that Rangers were pursuing a very hazardous path, and the kind of reckless, financially reckless ethos that he developed in the club brought about Craig White.
Okay, well let's one man who has a unique take in these events is Gordon Smith, a former Rangers player who worked under Craig White as Director of Football at Ibrox. Smith was also Chief Executive of the SFA and has insight as to their responsibility in the Rangers crisis. I spoke to him earlier at the Football Museum at Hampden. Did you get any sense that Craig White had a particular plan? Were you aware of what his plan was?
No, not really. He always said he was there for the long term to take Rangers forward, so I didn't see any short-term plan in that. And he did, as I say, there was two things were significant. And one was he said, that's going to be it's going to be a difficult year now because of the loss of not being in the Champions League qualifying stage. And the second part was that the big tax case could throw up a problem down the line if it goes against the club.
From this perspective, do you think you were duped by Craig White and the rest of the people working?
I don't say duped, but I was brought in and say he was making those things clear. The only thing I didn't realise was there was going to be we're going to get into administration. I didn't know that there was certain costs were not being met, and that was the PAYE and stuff like that. We never knew anything about that was happening. I say duped, well, we didn't see, I didn't know it was happening, so to a degree, that word could be used, but I don't like to use that word.
What was the atmosphere like at Ibrox generally, working under Craig White?
There was a kind of worry. Craig White wasn't about an awful lot. Craig, came for home matches and he would come in and see us with the odd meeting about taking forward strategy.
Now you also had a significant role with the SFA, and I'm just wondering what their perspective is in all this, particularly the dispute with Rangers over the transfer of players. How do you see that playing out?
It's a difficult one because it was proved to be, and Rangers took them to obviously the Court of Session to prove that that wasn't a sanction they could bring in, so that has to be dealt with. I think what we all have to do and look at it is, regardless of how anybody feels about Rangers, we know people from other clubs don't like Rangers. If you're not, that's the thing about football, there's rivalries there, and if you're not a fan, you're the other way normally, you hate the club sort of thing. So a lot of people will be like that, and what they have to realise is that we're looking at also the Scottish game here. Some people are saying, never mind the Scottish game, get Rangers out, that's what we want. But for me, I have to look at it and say, I want to see a good product here. We want to see the club, the game going forward in Scotland to a good degree.
If Rangers do go down into the SFL, how do you foresee the SPL over the next 2-3 years? How do you see it shaping?
I think it'll be difficult for the SPL if Rangers go down, because you're looking at a scenario there where you say, well, they've lost gate money from Rangers, no question of that. There could be a difficulty with the broadcasting rights. Would the Sky TV still look at that and say, well, our football deal will continue, we're quite happy, when they've lost 4 Old Firm games? Because that could be a big factor in terms of their audience figures and why they put that level of money in, because it's one of the biggest derbies, if not the biggest in world football. And then you're looking at the scenario there where the clubs, is there going to be competition? Whoever is obviously going to be getting second place in the league, that's fine. It won't be Rangers or Celtic. Celtic will probably go and win in the league because they've got the best team.
Is it the case that we're maybe seeing a complete sea change in Scottish football, with Rangers perhaps going down to the SFL, no money in the SPL, Celtic maybe struggling to keep players because they're not the same competition, struggling to get into progress in the Champions League because they don't have the competition, and therefore it might be in Celtic's best interests to perhaps go to another league altogether?
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that, about moving it, but I've spoken to people at high level down south in football, and there doesn't seem to be a great appetite in order to allow Celtic or Rangers in. I mean, there's been a lot of talk for years about both of them going away and saying, would that benefit Scottish football? They're two Scottish teams, and I'm not sure that they would be accepted down south because they're basically based here. So I think that there would be a difficult for Scottish football. Not saying it's the end of Scottish football, but I think it would certainly downplay it to a degree, because a lot of players will come to play for Celtic and to play for Rangers because of to play in the Old Firm match. I mean, I played in 15 of them, and they're fantastic games to play in. You know, you can't think of anything better. I never had experienced any games like it anywhere else I went to play, and I played in 4 countries, but I never experienced anything like playing a Rangers Celtic game.
Gordon Smith, thanks for joining us in Scotland tonight.
Thanks, John.
To consider some of these issues further, we're now joined by the writer for the Rangers Standard, Chris Graham, and the rest of the panel. The SFA sanctions that still exist, the SPL sanctions that are still there, Tom, that's still lying in wait for Rangers.
It is. Well, I mean, the SFA Judicial's panel placed a transfer embargo on the club that was deemed not appropriate by Lord Glennie, so it's now back at Lord Carloway. The options available to him are taking away their licence. There is some talk here behind the scenes of Charles Green trying to accept the transfer embargo now, as opposed to running the risk of getting his licence taken away, which is curious, because we see last weekend Green talking about 19 transfer targets for the club, five of them playing currently in the European Championships, at a time when we think he might be trying to appeal, trying to go for the transfer embargo.
Your head dropped there, Chris. Are you not convinced by what's happening?
Well, I don't think anybody was terribly convinced by the 19 transfer targets. There's a few things Charles Green has said recently that I don't think have been altogether convincing.
And what were the threat of the SFA sanctions, though?
Well, it's difficult to know, again, what the SFA are going to do next. I mean, they've backed themselves into a corner somewhat. I think the club had to appeal. They should have been able to appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. That was denied to them, so they took it to the Court of Session. Possibly, in hindsight, that wasn't the wisest move, but it depends on what the SFA do next. They've got the option of the Scottish Cup ban, which seems like probably the most moderate of the options that they have left. But I don't think the SFA had rules in place to actually deal with this properly, and I think if they had admitted that at the time and possibly just levied the fines that they did, then this whole thing could have been avoided.
In a sentence, Colin, are you more relieved tonight than you were last night, perhaps, about Rangers' future?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, at the end of the day, we think we know where we're going anyway, but there's still lots of issues. There's still too many issues to really feel at ease, and until, well, the season, you're going to look into the next season now, so all of a sudden you've got fixtures coming out very shortly. Yeah. So things have got to happen on Monday, so things have got to happen very quickly.
Okay, for the moment, gentlemen, thanks very much indeed. In part 2 of this Scotland Tonight special, what will be the impact of Rangers not playing in the SPL, empty stadiums or newfound competitiveness? Much has been idly written in the last few years about whether Scottish football can survive without the Old Firm, but now it's a very real possibility, with Rangers potentially being made to play in the lowest tier of league football if SPL clubs decide to vote them out, or if the SFA indeed suspend their licence. David Marsland has this.
Would this be the Scottish Premier League without Rangers? TV crews ignoring empty stadiums, games played to a handful of diehards in an irrelevant league? Or would it actually open up a stifled competition and perhaps even be Rangers' redemption? Football fans want Rangers out of the SPL. A Scott Pulse poll for Scotland Tonight shows nearly 70% believe a Newco club has no place in the top flight. Rangers fans themselves disagree, at least most of them. Nearly a quarter support demotion.
We are at a major crossroads for Scottish football and significantly the future of many clubs.
Dundee United are one of the dozen SPL sides who'll vote on Rangers' future. Aberdeen, who unveiled their new kit today, are another and appear to be weighing up their options very carefully. In a statement, Pittodrie's chief executive Duncan Fraser said the integrity of sport in general and football in particular must be central to any decision. But then it wasn't so long ago that Rangers, who are worth an estimated £375,000 to every club in the SPL, wanted out. So did Celtic, to play in England. At that time, the old firm argued Scottish football would be better off without them.
In Scotland, with Celtic and Rangers dominating the league and dominating the other cup competitions as well, for that matter, you know, what is there for the rest to play for? The league could be more healthy and more competitive and give people something to fight for.
Not just at home, the Europa League group stage was worth around £1 million to Aberdeen in 2009. That would be much easier to repeat without Rangers, and good compensation for any domestic loss. And for lower league clubs like Peterhead, even a financially crippled Rangers would still bring a big support. Every team Rangers face on the climb back to the SPL would benefit, and perhaps themselves too.
From a manager's point of view, he probably wouldn't want it. But I think from a footballing perspective, and listening there again into radio, lots of Rangers supporters agreeing that they would love just go back into third division, reorganise, they will rise, they will get back to the SPL much, much stronger in the end.
An SPL without Rangers had been unthinkable. Now it's not. And the thinking from some is, it may not be so bad for anyone.
Now rejoined by Archie, Tom, Chris, and the author of How the Ball Burst, Ian Hislop. Welcome back again, gentlemen. Chris, David Trotter tweets, Rangers shouldn't even ask to go straight into the SPL. They should apply to the SFL, start at the bottom and pump some money into the lower leagues, which is what the implication was at the end of that report. Is that a realistic possibility? Is it something you might even welcome?
I think one of the reasons why I think a lot of Rangers fans are suggesting the possibility of starting in Division 3 is because of the possible sanctions that the SPL will impose on the club. I don't think anybody wants to go to Division 3. I think it's more a case of if we're going to be made to have increased sanctions, you know, the potential of points losses at the start of every season, the potential of reduced revenue from prize money, etc., then I think a lot of people would say, well, you know, what's the point of being in the SPL if essentially the club can't be competitive?
There's also a sense of, though, taking your punishment. You know, the club have been wrong, and that's part of the punishment they should accept.
I think there is a sense of that, perhaps, but I don't think, I mean, the club are being punished quite heavily already. I mean, you know, by simply going to the new code, there's 3 years without European football. We've already had sanctions from the SFA. There's possible sanctions to follow from the SPL as well. I mean, at some point, you know, the sanctions have to stop, I think.
Ian, you've been round a lot of Scottish clubs, and there seems to be a division between what the Scottish clubs want and what their supporters want as regards dealing with Rangers.
Yeah, I think the supporters, the information we got earlier on was that the supporters would like to see Rangers demoted. I don't think that would do Rangers any good. I don't think it would do Scottish football any good. And as Chris says, you know, Rangers have been severely punished already. I can't see them playing in the third division. I don't think it makes any sense.
And what about the other clubs? Is it the economic argument from their point of view that they can't afford not to have Rangers there?
In the Premier clubs, you mean?
In the SPL, yeah.
In the SPL, I don't think they cannot afford to have Rangers in the SPL yet.
We've got people tweeting us saying, Davey, Scottish football will not die without Rangers. That's the myth the fans are swallowing. Tom, is that a myth?
I tend to agree with Davey. I think the financial Armageddon that we hear about of Rangers leaving the SPL or not being welcomed back into the SPL has been overstated. I suspect it's been overstated. We don't know. We don't know for sure. But all around the country, there's fans crunching the numbers and seeing what the actual figure is that it's going to cost. I don't think Rangers should be allowed back into the SPL. I think they should be put into the third division. I don't think it's right that Rangers should be brought into the SPL with sanctions and points deductions, because that's the SPL clubs wanting their cake and eating it. I think it should be a proper punishment.
And very briefly, Archie, people have been asked to buy season tickets and they don't know who they're playing, whether Rangers fans or whether they're other SPL clubs.
Well, exactly. It's utter confusion. But the big news of the week, of course, is the television contract signing in the South and the immense effect this is going to have on the Scottish game. I know
that's £3 billion.
I know a Celtic supporting former Minister of the Crown telling me with deep regret his two sons should be Celtic supporters, but they support Manchester City. And you see boys running about the street now with different jerseys on from the English clubs. Television creates wealth for football clubs. We need that in Scotland. Without Rangers in the SPL, it's debatable whether they would produce a product to encourage sponsors. It's not just a case of doing arithmetic about saying how many Rangers supporters come with their away tickets, 3,000. Oh, we can manage that. It's about the product. How are they going to attract a television company to put down a lot of money if it's not a competitive?
We'll consider this point again, so sorry for interrupting there. In part 3 of this Scotland Tonight special, a fan's view of the Rangers crisis and are other teams sympathetic to their fate? Welcome back to the Scotland Tonight special on Rangers downfall. We're now joined by former Celtic director Michael Kelly. Thanks for joining us, Michael. You went through this with Celtic, what Rangers are going through, something similar at least. Are you sympathetic at all?
Well, I wouldn't draw parallels with Celtic, it's entirely different, but my sympathies are really with the supporters that started speaking at the beginning of the programme. I really empathise with them. You know, as a supporter myself who loves football, who loves his club, I can see what a terrible blow this is to the ordinary fans. So I would approach this from the football point of view. Sanctions against Rangers should only be of a football nature, and Scottish football needs Rangers in the Premier League, and we must ensure that they're there. The best part of my season, despite the European triumph 1967 and all that, my long experience of Old Firm games, that they are the best games of the season. And I go back to the Danny Kaye final in 1950. That was my first Old Firm game, and of course Celtic won. So I think for me and most fans, most Celtic fans, should want Rangers to be there. Otherwise, competition is finished and finances are seriously undermined.
But you're agreeing with that, Archie, but there is a question, is there not a sporting integrity though?
Well, yes, sporting integrity. Look, I'm not disagreeing with Tom when he said Rangers should go to the third division and start there. I would be in sympathy with the view that they should take the medicine, start off there, climb up. They've been in the wilderness before, and you've seen Rangers in the wilderness when they were winning nothing. 3-4 years doing nothing. They were just a fringe team. And the average attendance was 21,000. I know that because David Holmes used to say when he joined the board, the directors used to have a sweep on what the attendance was going to be. And the chairman, John Payton, never put anything beyond 23,000. 3 years later, there were 45,000 and counting, and they couldn't get them all in.
Yeah,
so
actually,
they should be.
we're talking about sporting sanctions, and I think there has to be that, because there has to be this element of integrity.
No, I don't
and I think what you
that.
do then is you focus on these years where Rangers won trophies when they had ineligible players, and I would deprive them of those trophies and award the trophies to the runners-up. I think rather than a financial sanction or a demotion is much more effective.
Hold on a second, guys. I want Chris, you respond to that as a Rangers fan.
Well, I think you have to prove it first. I mean,
absolutely. There's a lot of allegations been made that may not be true, but if it is established that Rangers won trophies with ineligible players, they should be deprived, as Benson George Johnson was in the Olympics, of the trophy, and the runner-up, Carl Lewis, awarded the gold medal.
Well, like Michael, I love the Old Firm game. I love to be part of the Old Firm game. It was a big challenge. I personally would miss it tremendously. I go back to Tom's point. I don't disagree with him about starting off from the base again. But I go back to television. Television provides the only finance for football now. It's not about the arithmetic of how many Rangers supporters will go, or will Celtic supporters boycott if somebody votes Rangers in, and so on. It's about providing a product. If the SPL without Rangers could get a television contract with sponsorship, good luck to them. But I think it's going to be very difficult.
Tom.
First of all, imagine if Rangers are in the third division. I'm not convinced that Sky are just going to say, we're going to walk away. Rangers in the third division, I would imagine, would be a really enticing commodity for Sky.
Sure.
Novelty factor.
It's not an enticing commodity for Rangers supporters, never mind a television audience. Who wants to go to Brecon or to Dumfries or whatever? They're not going to pay for season tickets for that.
Are you saying that there aren't tens of thousands of Rangers fans who would like to see them?
Would this be a point of principle, perhaps, that they would go to show backing for the team rather than to actually see the football? It's a statement.
For a couple of months, not for 3 seasons.
3 years. I've got no wish to watch Rangers playing in the third division, the second division, but I would follow the team no matter where they were playing. I mean, I think this idea of sanctions is is fair enough, but it discounts to some extent the sanctions that have already been applied. And I think at some point there has to be a kind of end to the bloodlust for more and more and more
what effective sanctions have been applied? None.
Just move on ever so
None.
slightly then.
Well,
Just before we come to the end of the programme then, Tom, you know Charles Green, you followed the story. Do you think Charles Green, the pressure, he was booed by Rangers fans tonight, do you think he will stick it or do you think he'll walk away?
That's a $1 million question, and it's not something I would like to call at the moment. I just think that Charles Green and his group are going to come under huge amount of pressure to hand over to do a deal. Now the numbers they're looking for are ridiculous. I think what they quote tonight is a multiple of 15.5 million. That's what they reckon they need to sell it. I just think the pressure on them will be huge. And
in a sentence, do you think Rangers fans will back him if he stays?
I think the Rangers fans at the moment would back Walter Smith, and I hope that Charles Green realises that it's nothing against Charles Green, but you can't compete with Walter Smith.
Gentlemen, thanks very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well, that's it from the Scotland Tonight special. We'll be back on July the 2nd with a new series. More on stv.tv/Rangers. Thanks for watching. Good night.